you manage your short-term savings? Short-term checking, things like that.
Your cash.
So what are you earning on your savings? What costs and fees are you paying? What are you earning on your checking? What are your plans and strategies? How many months will you have and which assets for your emergency fund? Benjamin Franklin said, he says, I take care of the pennies and the dollars take care of themselves. And so I think that's good advice for us. If we can watch the small things, then we can do a lot better. Sister Sedgwick's example with her CD is a good case in point. Went from making $2 to quite a bit more a year. So what are your vision? What are your goals, plans and strategies? What are the constraints? We had a student last semester on his case study. He said, I'm realizing that I not only have to have an emergency fund for me and my family, but I have to have an emergency fund for my extended family too, because he was constantly being asked.
For money.
For money. So what they did is they had their own emergency fund, and then they had an extended family emergency fund to help out when there are needs there. And you know, you may need to think about something like that. There's lots of different thoughts. What short-term savings vehicle, savings assets, an asset is just something that has value. What short-term savings are available in your countries? Zach, what about Hong Kong?
Yeah, savings account. Yeah.
So kind of the same things? Short time deposits, things like that. Yeah, so it's what's called a spread business. They borrow it from you. Most of the time it's a very low interest rate, and they'll lend it out at a higher rate. If they're paying you 1% and they can lend it out at 8%, that they're making 7% on the spread. So it's important to understand what's available in your country.
But the reason that you take the lower percentage is because you want it to be liquid.
Yeah.
You want to be able to access it quickly to pay your bills, to buy food, to pay your rent. But you'll invest your more longer term money in other things that gain more interest. But you have to have some liquid in order to use it to pay your bills.
Okay. So someone want to define cash management for me? Metzley, what does it sound like, cash management?
To manage
Your cash.
the money that is
1, 2.
Yeah.
So this is taxes.
Very liquid. Does it mean how much cash you have in your wallet? Because I actually have no cash in my wallet. I don't like carrying cash.
He spends it all.
So it's ours is a 50-50 operation. I earn it, my wife spends it.
My wallet has lots of money in it.
Our kids used to say, Dad, if you need some money, go ask Mom. She knows where to get it. So cash management is really safe, short-term liquid assets. And it's generally to meet your short-term financial goals. Again, immediately accessible, low risk, very liquid. What's the problem with low risk assets? What are the returns on low risk assets? Low, that's right. So the challenge is how do you manage those? But you need some liquid assets because you need it to pay your bills. You need it to pay your expenses. You've got to have cash to be able to make the payments. And so the reason cash is important, it's the basis of your emergency fund.
No, that's one's for you. Yeah.
What are some assets used in the U.S.? Different countries have similar ones, but we're just going to talk about these today.
Tax management.
Having problems with the tech.
Taxes.
So traditional cash management assets, checking accounts, savings accounts. Savings also includes high yield savings, certificate deposit. And then you've got some less traditional, like a short-term bond fund, or treasury bills, or savings bonds. So we'll just talk a little bit about each of those today. So goals of cash management. You know, this changes over time. When we had 7 kids in the home, Sister Sedgwick's most important thing on cash management was a bank close by that had a drive-through, so she didn't have to get out.
Get out of the car.
She could do all of her stuff in the drive-through. As Kids have left home, the goals change a little bit. But again, these are the main ones. Easy access, no fees, personal attention, security, and perks. Principles of cash management. What happens? Last year, inflation was about 3%. That means that unless you earn 3% on your investments, you lost ground. So, again, we need to realize that. Also, on Friday, we learned about taxes. We learned that everybody here is almost everybody here is in the 10% marginal tax rate. So if you earn money, taxes will take away 10% of that. So our return, it's not just what you earn. It's not just your return after inflation, but it's return after inflation and return after tax. If you earned 1% on your savings and you pay 10% as your marginal tax rate, your return on your investment is not going to be 1%. It's going to be 1% times 1 minus your 10% that you paid, or 0.9. So again, it's not what you make, but what you save after taxes and after inflation, really, that makes you wealthy. So seek for the highest return in terms of after tax, consistent with your liquidity, safety, interest rate, and cost requirements. And we really want to develop a plan on how we're going to put together an emergency fund. So what are we doing? I have a plan to be wise stewards over our short-term finances, especially the small things which can add up over time, so that I can accomplish my personal mission and my individual family vision and goals. So that's what we want to do.
So this might be on the quiz.
It is on the quiz.
What is the most important role of cash management? So go ahead, bleep it.
What is it?
They don't know.
Let's see if they know the answer. Most important role of cash management.
To build emergency fund.
So if you have an emergency fund, it's amazing. It changes an emergency to an inconvenience.
So we want to make sure that you have enough to meet your immediate bills, but you also have an emergency fund in case there's a problem.
Yeah. So what is it? It's just liquid assets to meet immediate and unexpected return needs. Why? Because as the prophet said, it brings, even though it would be small, he says it brings peace of mind and heart. You've got a credit card now. Can the credit card company turn off your credit? Yeah, they can. In a very short time. How about home equity lines of credit? Can those be canceled as well? The answer is yes. So a credit card really is not an emergency fund because you're borrowing to do that emergencies. What's the benefit of a good emergency fund? Just less stress, better relationships. Well, how much do we recommend? 3 to 6 months of living expenses is what's recommended. I had a 4-month emergency fund and I lost my job and it took me 6 months to find work. Those last 2 months were tough. So, again, we just need to be wise. Does all of your emergency fund have to be in one thing? Does it all have to be in your checking account? Probably not. Because again, realize if you've got 3 to 6 months income, that's quite a bit of money. And Sister Sedgwick and I, what we do is we have 1 month in our checking account, we have 1 month in a savings account, and the rest are in short-term bond funds that we can access pretty quickly. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have get the highest return on our
Investments.
investments. So again, let's go to the different vehicles. We don't have a lot of time. If you go to the skills development, it's got some graphs, a little bit more historical graphs. But these are kind of your traditional ones: checking accounts, savings, and that includes high yield savings, CDs. And then there's less traditional, short-term bond funds. You can buy a mutual fund that invests in very short-term instruments. So it might have a average maturity, meaning the length until these financial instruments mature is 7 days or 30 days. So those are mutual funds. And again, if you remember, what they do is people come together, pool their money, they hire a professional manager, and hopefully they do a good job. That's what mutual funds are. You can actually use treasury bills. You can actually sign up for those. And these are kind of fun savings bonds. And we'll talk about each of these things here in a minute. Checking accounts, again, you can access it directly. You can write checks. How many people here have checking accounts? So it used to be very prevalent. Now people are moving away from them as well.
Yeah, because you can pay things online.
Yeah, pay things
really
online,
easily.
things like that. Again, what we did is we came up with 7 different criteria, liquidity. When we talk about required minimum balances, what are those? So oftentimes with some assets, you have to have a certain amount of money. They require you to have $1,000 or $10,000 or $300 there before you can invest in that asset. That's what that is. Interest rates.
Or they want you to keep a minimum balance in your account.
Right.
So if you go below that, then they charge you.
Yeah, okay. Safety and taxes. Anyone know what FDIC stands for? Caleb.
Insured by, it's federally insured?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And what it is insurance that if a company or if a bank, all banks are part of the FDIC, and if the bank goes under, the FDIC will insure your deposits up to a certain amount. It's actually up to $500,000, which is not bad. Mm-hmm. So taxes too, you all have federal taxes, but you also had state taxes too. So realize that has an impact. What's your source of information, banks and credit union, and how do you invest? You can contact a bank. And then savings accounts. Again, now all of a sudden, you're putting your money in for a longer period of time. Now there's a difference too. There are what's called high yield savings accounts too. And what that is a lot of your banks have what we call brick and mortar. So they've got a branch, and they've got tellers, and they've got people there, so they have to pay for the branch and the electricity. And a lot of people are what are called internet banks, also FDIC insured. But instead of having 250 branches, they have one. And so because they don't have all these additional expenses, they can offer higher rates. Again, as you're using internet banks, make sure on the browser you see where it says HTTPS, which means it's secured. In the bottom right hand, you'll see a lock too. But again, savings accounts a little bit higher than your checking. And if you go
Checking's
high
pretty
yield,
much zero.
yeah, if you go high yield accounts, you can get probably 2 to 3, maybe even 4%.
Maybe.
Yeah, 4% is.
That's really on the high end.
That's 4% on the high end. And then you've got CDs. Go ahead.
Okay. So CDs are a time deposit by a bank or another financial place. So they'll give you a fixed rate over a certain period of time. So I had 3 different CDs going. I had one for 7 months and one for 11 months and one for like 4 months.
Huh.
Anyway, or 5 months. Anyway, so then I actually just rolled them all into one. I let them all mature, and then I got one now for 11 months.
Yeah.
So it keeps an interest rate.
Downside with CDs is once they mature, you have to reinvest it again. So you have to do some work there.
You have to decide, because if you let them decide, they'll give you a lower rate. So I get
And these rates, this is more kind of a general rate. I've seen CDs as high as 3.5%, 4%. Notice you'll see 1 month, 3, 6, 1 year, 5 year. I've even seen 10 years out there too. What about a short-term bond mutual fund that invests in very short-term instruments? So like a money market mutual fund, or a money market account or something like this. So there's funds out there, there's mutual funds that invest in short-term instruments. So let's say you have a bond, it's a 6% bond, but if it's got 2 weeks until it matures, a lot of these people will buy those type of bonds. So they know what the return is exactly that they're going to get. So again, our bond funds, our mutual funds, FDIC insured, they're actually not. But the nice thing about them is a company going to go bankrupt in 7 days or 14 days or 30 days. Usually the companies go bankrupt, they see it quite a while before it comes. Again, not FDIC insured, all taxable. Some of these things, you can actually write checks. You can do different things here too. So just be aware that there's a lot of other things that go along with these short-term bond funds. But the nice thing about those is you put the money in and you don't have to every 11 months or every 7 months make the decision, okay, what are we going to invest in?
So if you put it in the bond fund, you could use it as there's a seat right there.
Right here.
Or there, but mine's kind of full.
Okay.
Okay, but if you put your stuff in a short-term bond fund and if you can write checks on it, it would be better than doing a checking account.
So just be aware, they have limited number of checks that you
Right,
can write.
so you can't write very many checks.
But again, let's try to be aware of our alternatives, and then we can just make the best decisions. Now, this one's kind of a unique one. Have you ever thought of savings bonds? Anyone heard of savings bonds?
This is in the U.S. only, guys.
So
Sorry.
the government is trying to encourage people to save. So when you lend, you can actually purchase a savings bond. And so, again, right now there's two of them that we like. One's a double E and an I bond. The double E is, the rate changes every 6 months. So you're earning 2.6% through April of 2025. Last year, inflation was 3%. Did you make any money? No. This is not FDIC insured, but can the government always print new money? And the answer is yes. So in essence, they're risk-free. Notice government treasury bills and government savings bonds are all state tax-free. But there's a unique thing about these double E and the I bonds. If you use principal and interest to pay for your tuition for your child's education at college, it's already state tax-free, but it becomes federal tax-free as well. So this is one of those few cash management vehicles that can also help you as you save for your kids' education as well.
And help you save on taxes.
Yeah, we actually, when our kids were young, we actually had our 1 month of our emergency, 1 to 2 months of our emergency fund was in I bonds, just because we liked it. Downside is after 12 months, you can turn them in. So they're illiquid for the first 12 months. And if you redeem them before 5 years, there's a 3-month penalty.
So we just hung on to ours for a while and then used it for our kids' tuition and it didn't cost us taxes.
So it was federal and state tax-free too. Now, this is an inflation-linked bond. So inflation last year was 3%. Now it's 3.1. Did you make money on this bond compared to inflation? And the answer is yes. So what happens, every 6 months, the rate changes based on inflation. So 2 years ago, this was up to 7.6, almost 8% too. So again, safety guaranteed. And again, interest tax-free if spent on eligible college tuition. And it's already from state and local. So what we need to do is just realize that a lot of these assets have different tax benefits, have different other benefits here. And so what we can do is we need to understand them and then use the ones that best meet our needs.